Hello everyone, in this tutorial I'll show you how to model a simple type of ski goggles in Rhino. Let's drag an image to the front view, choose picture options and drag a rectangle. I suggest bigger than the grid. Zoom extends. Okay. Save the file and choose a very simple name like ski goggles. Change the name of the layer to picture. Create a new layer named 2D. Change color to blue. Switch to the front view. Make 2D layer active, and before check if ortho and gimbal are active. Okay, in case you forgot to make 2D layer current, just change layer to the line. Then select line. But as you can see, I can select also the picture, so I have to lock the picture layer. Okay, I select the line by using gimbal. I can turn off record history. I drag the line as close as possible to the left side of the goggle. Then I copy by dragging red arrow and clicking Alt key. Then I adjust the position of this second line. As much I zoom in, as better the precision. Okay, just a final check. And after that, I will turn on OSNAP and I make end active. Then I pick the line command and drag a line between these two vertical lines. I turn on mid snap line again from mid. Ortho is on, so I go straight vertical. That way I found the central axis, the symmetry axis. Okay, I can delete the construction lines. I just keep the central one. Okay, I disable ortho and snap, even, and I pick curve from interpolation curve. But better if I keep OSNAP on and with snap near, I click near the curve on top and I'm start tracing the silhouette of the frame, of the goggles frame. Okay, let's try to use as less point as possible, because it's easier than to edit the curve. And the final point is also on the vertical line. Okay. At this stage, we focus on the quality of that curve, and we start to align to y-axis these 2 points. I moved just this one to show how it works. I select these 2 points, Gumball, the green square. I put 0 value, and this makes the end of the curve, in this case the start of the curve, flat. Okay, which is what I want. Then I do almost the same to the bottom. So I select these 2 points and I set 0 value in y-axis. Probably in this case I can use 3 points. I can align 3 points. Maybe it's better. Okay. After that, I go on with editing control points to fit as better as possible the shape of the frame. It's just a matter of your feeling, your sense of view. Okay. On the right in the dock, now I'm checking. I'm using a wireframe visualization. Okay, view, and here you see display tab allows us to enable to view, to show all entities, all kind of entity. But in this case, I would like to edit the thickness of the curves, because when we are tracing a picture, it's not always easy to see. And you see curve settings, curve width. I increased the width to 3 or 4 or more, as you wish, as you like. That way it's easier to see the curves we are going to draw. Okay, I continue editing the curve. This process is crucial. We have to be a little bit patient in this stage, because the quality of the curves, this curve and others we are going to draw, is fundamental, it's crucial. Okay, so we are just adjusting all points. We can use analyze curvature graph to better understand how the curve goes. You see, this graph shows the curvature, of course, and also the flow. So basically we want to keep all points out of the curve on the bottom in this case, and this, okay, this is important to get very very smooth curves. Okay, as you can see here, for instance, there's a flexion inside, and this is not really good. This is kind ugly. So if we move the point out, the curvature tend to be flat, because in this part it's almost flat, but not flex. There's not an inner flexion. Okay. Okay. We are almost done. Okay. Something else, just some few details. Sometimes it's very good. It's a good idea to save. Okay. Okay, now we are going to mirror this curve. We have near, snap, and ortho on. I just click one point on the vertical curve, and another one, a random one. It doesn't matter, because we are using ortho and near snap, and I get the right side of this shape, this curve. Okay, I'm going to join these two parts. Now I have just one curve. If I click on it, I can see the control points, and it's a good idea to adjust a little bit better. As you can see here, the junction is somehow flat, so we can delete the central point. The shape is almost the same, but now the curve is smooth. Here we have 2 points with the same problem. I mean, it's not really a problem, but it's a consequence of what we did. Okay, and in this case also we can delete the 2 midpoints and just move a little bit or scale a little bit the other points. Okay. Now we are aware that our curve is continuous and smooth. There are no sharpened points. Okay. We try to make an offset of this curve. We use a true point option, and we click with end snap enabled the vertical line. As you can see, due to the perspective, our curve doesn't follow exactly the curve in the picture. So we can first, we have to rebuild our curve to get less points. There are around 200 points. We want to reduce the number as much as possible. Okay, this case with 50 points we have a very small deviation. With 30 maybe it's a little bit too much. 40 probably can work. It's a good deal. We have just 0.3 millimeters of deviation. Okay, and now I use Gumball. I scale in X dimension, and I'm getting closer to the picture. But still, we have to make some adjustment, and it's very important to select symmetrically the points. Okay, so for instance, one on left and the other on right. Otherwise, we will lose symmetry. Okay, and so on. So just try to figure out which is which, and to move accordingly. Okay. It's possible also to follow a different approach, probably more accurate and less tricky. Okay, I just put a note here. An alternative approach can be to trim out, for instance, the right part of our inner curve, then to adjust the left part, and finally to mirror the left part to the right, and for getting the final result. Okay, so I'm gonna use trim. Cutting object is this vertical line. I cut out this part, this right part. Okay, so I go on editing my curve. First, I rebuild it because we have too many points, and I want to reduce as much as possible. Again, okay, you see, probably with 20 points it's okay. Let's spend some time to edit the points. Okay. Remember that it's very important to keep the points out or inside the curve, but to avoid in and out, because the result will be a very noisy curve. Okay, something like a wavy curve, which we don't want. Okay, in this case, it's very smooth and almost precise, almost accurate to the picture. Okay, we align this ending point as we did previously. We turn a curvature graph on just to make things clearer and to be aware of what we're doing exactly. Okay, we go on that way. Okay, as you can see, the curvature is almost okay. I make flat also the top part of the curve. This one was already done. And now it's time for mirroring this half part of the frame. I enable near OSNAP and ortho, and I do mirroring. Okay. Then I join these two curves, and I got just one. I edit as usual the midpoints, the central points, to make the curve perfectly smooth. So I delete the midpoint, and I keep the others. As you can see, the curve is completely and perfectly smooth everywhere there. Here we have to make some major adjustment, because as you can see, these 2 points are aligned, but one of those is flat, okay, is sharp. So we have to delete this point. Then we can drag this point to the middle by using the snap, okay. And after that, we just make sure that these 2 points are aligned. They are. Then I select all 3 points and just drag to the top with Gumball, okay? As you can see, the curve also here in this part is perfectly smooth, okay? I can do some minor adjustment, and we are almost ready to go on. Let's save. Okay. Okay. Let's go to the perspective view, and okay, I disable OSNAPs and I enable intersection. I pick ellipse diameter. I pick this point. Then, without exiting the command, I go to the top view and I draw my ellipse. Be sure that the ellipse is bigger, is wider than the frame. Okay. We can adjust the shape of this ellipse, but it's safe to use. It's very safe to use Gumball, because we want to keep the center of this ellipse to the same Y coordinate. Okay, as you can see, I can drag also the object, but it has to stay aligned that way. Okay. I go back to the top view. I enable quad snap. I take line command. I draw this line that I'm going to use as a cutting object with the trim command. I can delete also this line, and I get the half part of the ellipse. Okay, at this point we are ready to go on to the 3D. Before we do that, let's create a new layer, okay? And move it to the bottom, down. Okay, for some reason in this moment it's not possible to rename it. Sometimes you can face some small issue with Rhino, some small bugs, especially if you're using Mac version, but don't mind, we will fix it later. Okay, we just let this default name, no problem. But make active this layer. Then go to curve from two views. Okay, maybe before we can hide picture layer. Okay, for clarity, curve from two views. Pick this curve, the outer line of the frame, and this curve, and I get this 3D curve. Okay, redo it with the inner curve, and now this one, this curve, and this curve. Okay, and I get the inner 3D curve. Okay, as we did previously, we can change again the width of curves. In this case, I will reduce it because it's nicer to see. Okay, more comfortable, at least for me. Okay, we can hide 2D layer, the layer named 2D, and just go to Loft command, select these two curves. Be aware that the arrows are the same direction, oriented the same direction. Okay. Okay, style normal, no options, just the default options, and click on OK to confirm. Switch to the shaded view, and as you can see, it seems that this object is flipped somehow, but it doesn't matter. If you look at this surface isocurves, I usually turn it off because I don't like to see the isocurve, and back face color is orange in my case. In fact, if you use analyze direction, you can see this is the back of the object. Okay, but it doesn't matter really. Now we are going to offset the surface. Direction is okay. Solid must be yes. Okay, and distance, let me try with, for instance, 4 millimeters, but it depends on the size you draw the object. Okay, that way I get a 3D object, a solid, a so-called solid. Okay, and this is the frame. Don't mind about the seam lines, they are just a representation. If I go to the fillet edges command, let me try with 1 millimeter radius. I select everything, press OK. It may take a while. It depends on on your computer and other parameters, but usually it's a matter of maybe 1 minute, no more. Okay, so finally we got this result, which I liked. Is as we said at the beginning of this tutorial, this is a very concept object, very simple one. Let's save, of course, but I hope this can be useful for you, because it's just a simple way, but this is a first way to get things like this done. Okay, let's move on to the last object that we have to model, which is the lens. Okay, so I go back to 2D curves, and in this case I go to shaded, switch to shaded view. Okay, and I'm going to make an offset of this blue curve, the ellipse. Okay, so offset, I put 2, which is half of the extrusion, the offset that we used for getting the solid. Okay, reveal the curve. I try to go really small. So for instance, with 7, maybe it's not enough, but probably something around 10 or maybe a little more can be enough. Okay, you see 11 points produce very small deviation. Okay, I got this offset curve, and okay, I can extrude it. I extrude it down. Okay, we create a new layer, we call it lens. Okay, we make it active, and we change object to this. Also, if it's not active, it's enough to select it. Okay, now in front view, okay, I make lens layer named lens active. Okay, then we draw an offset also of this curve. Okay, and I'm going to project it onto this surface. Delete input yes, because I don't want to keep too many curves. And this is the result. This is what I got. I can use trim, and I trim out this part of the surface. So basically I got my lens, even if it's a surface, so it has no thickness. Okay, that's why now we are going to make an offset this time of this surface. This time we select both sides. Okay, and let's try with 1 millimeter, so both sides means 0.5. Okay, because it's double, 0.5 plus 0.5, so I just type 0.5. After a while we get our object, and this is our lens. Okay. Okay. Now the object is almost done. Okay. We can compare our object to the picture. Okay. For doing that, we can change the transparency of the picture. How, as you can see here, in the layers, it's not possible to make adjustment about transparency, but we are going to unlock this layer picture. We select the picture. If you go to properties, you can see there's under materials, there's a lot of settings, almost the same. If you go directly to materials, it's almost the same, because a picture is basically a material, a texture material. And if I go here, I can change the object transparency, and I will reduce it to probably by 50% or something more. Let me check. Okay, that way I can see through. I lock again this layer. Now I'm going to hide it. Okay. Objects are perfectly overlapping. Okay. So now I'm going to create the new materials. A new material, plastic type. I call it frame. Let's check. Let's choose a color, a random color, for instance, red. Assign to objects. Okay. Switch to rendered view. That way it's possible to get a preview of the final rendering. Okay. In case you have, as I have now in this moment, a very slow computer, okay, don't mind. You have to be a little bit patient, but it's working. Okay, anyway, I create a new layer. I call it frame. I move this object to that layer named frame. Okay, I hide layer 1 where there are the curves. Okay, now I'm going to create a new material for lens. We can choose also glass or something, but in this case probably metal can be smart, can do the job. Okay, so I create a new material. I assign it to the object. Okay, I can change the roughness. If I switch to polished, the surface is more shiny, more polished, of course. Okay. As I said, my computer has a very weak graphic card, but I think it's a good example. of what we can do also with old laptops or something. Now we are going to render this scene. Okay, if you use a viewport, the resolution depends on your screen at that moment. Okay, I'm using draft quality, and as you can see, it takes a lot of time, so I stop it. I change something. For instance, I would use an environment. Okay, which makes the scene more realistic. I use the ground. In this case, I reduce the dimension of my rendering. So I use custom but lock to viewport aspect ratio. Okay, I use render, and in this case probably I will get the job done less than half time. Once it's done, I save it. I save the image. Okay, usually I use a PNG format, and I type just a name. Okay, which makes sense. Okay, after this, remember to save sometimes. Okay, last part of this tutorial is how can we create the text. Okay, so I create a new layer. First I rename the previous layer to 3D. Now it's working, and okay. Okay, as you can see, we missed this part. So I create a new layer. I call it goggles. Okay. Text object. Of course, our text will be goggles. Be sure that output is surfaces and a group output. Okay, let's try with this height. I don't know if 3 is okay or not. We are going to try. Okay, we are pretty close to the real size, but for now just put our object here, and with Gumball, let's scale in X dimension, and now we are almost done. Okay, at this stage it's important to understand that it's not possible to project surfaces onto other surfaces, but we can project points. So if I enable the control points, and I use just a selection filter, I just type cell PT, enter. Okay. Okay, at that point, from in a front view, it's important to be in front view. I use project curves onto delete the input. No, on this way, this case, because I want to see what will happen, and I click on that surface. As you can see, I got the projection to the surface. Okay, so I can delete the original because I don't need anymore. Okay, as you know, surfaces have no thickness, so I have to create one. I can use the small ball, the green ball, and I type minus, because the direction of the green axis is to the right, and in our case I want to go to the left. Minus 0.1 probably is okay. And now I got an object. Okay, I'm gonna create a new material for this object. In this case also I can create a plastic material. Maybe I change the name just to make it clearer. Okay, I assign it to that object. And now if I switch to the rendered view, okay, it's my final result. Okay, I can change maybe the color of the metal material to gold, something like gold, and that's all. In our next tutorial, we will see how to model something like this in a different way, with different sections, maybe with a different kind of lens. For now, it's all. You can play with materials, you can increase, for instance, the polishiness, so the metal will be more reflective, more shiny, and yeah, if you're using a more powerful computer, you will get better results. Bye.